Open button!
She's mine!
Welcome to 2023. Big businesses now merge with alien nations. An ancient war is being fought under the sea. The president is about to be cloned. And it's your job to try and save the world. So you've got an important decision to make. What are you going to wear to work? From the team who brought you GoldenEye for N64, meet Special Agent Joanna Dark in Perfect Dark, where you'll find out that the only person man enough to handle a job like this is a woman. Perfect Dark.
Today is a very special day, May 22nd, the day for us North Americans, when 23 years ago, Perfect Dark released on the Nintendo 64. But what's interesting is that this year's anniversary falls on the year that the game takes place. Yes, that's right, the plot of Perfect Dark takes place in May 2023. If you told me 23 years ago that this day would have come so soon, I would have told you you're nuts.
And yet, here we are. Normally I'm acting like a goof in front of the camera this time, but today I wanted to talk about a game which means so much to me. A game that really influenced my taste in gaming growing up. That game is just as important today as it was 23 years ago today. And that game is Perfect Dark.
Released on May 22, 2000 exclusively for the Nintendo 64 at the time, Perfect Dark was Rare's spiritual successor to their first-person shooter behemoth, GoldenEye. However, when it came time to work on a potential sequel via the next Bond film, Tomorrow Never Dies, Rare lost the license bid war, falling victim to Electronic Arts' deep pockets. It turns out that losing the James Bond license was the best thing that could have happened to them, as the developers had already decided they wanted their sequel ideas to morph into a more sci-fi futuristic story that would take elements from TV shows like X-Files, anime such as Ghost in the Shell, and movies like Blade Runner. During development around late 1998, several key members left the company and formed Free Radical, where they developed games like Time Splitters, which was very much in the same vein as GoldenEye and Perfect Dark in terms of familiarity.
But we're not here to talk about that, right? There's tons of videos online on YouTube and elsewhere, along with other behind-the-scenes articles that dive into how the game was made, what happened during development, and more. My goal for this video is not necessarily to review the game fairly, but to share my deep love and appreciation for it on the anniversary of its release, both literally and figuratively in the actual in-game world.
Growing up, I was always a Nintendo fan. Okay, I admit it. I wasn't just a fan, I was a fanboy. Anything Nintendo put out, I defended. Yeah, even the Virtual Boy. But the Nintendo 64 era brought a lot of change that was harder to justify. Cartridges versus CDs? Sure, there's less load times, but still, no Red Book audio and a severe lack of full motion video cutscenes. We can debate the Jaggies versus anti-aliasing and N64 fog all day, but what it really boiled down to for me was the games. This was actually the first generation that I owned a system outside of a Nintendo one. Yes, I owned a PlayStation 1, but it came second to me getting the Nintendo 64 for Hanukkah back in 1998. I was 15 when I got my N64, and 16 when I got a PS1. And well, my taste in games was certainly changing. I wasn't, and still am not, opposed to the family-friendly offerings of most Nintendo releases, but games like Parasite Eve, Resident Evil 2, and Fear Effect all ignited my passions for more mature themes in games. I wanted sex and violence, and I wanted it bad. Mature titles would come to the Nintendo 64 as well, and I gobbled them up, but the cinematic aspects of the cutscenes in PlayStation games had me excited. I was growing tired of mute protagonists, and I wanted a deeper connection to the game characters I was playing as. I was ready to enter the world of Joanna Dark. Perfect Dark's opening was styled so brilliantly, it's downright criminal. Watching the Nintendo 64 logo morph into this jagged shape, you knew you were in for something new and different on the system. I was awestruck at the futuristic skyline filled with vehicles buzzing by in the opening cutscene that played, seeing the flags waving in the distance against the building, the camera shaking as our heroine's aircraft blazes between rooftops, and even just after the title screen where we get to log into a computer terminal. Perfect Dark had an unbelievable sense of style and wasn't afraid to show it. I love that you could exit out of the computer system and walk around the Carrington Institute just going through gun testing and talking to people. It felt so insanely immersive. You really felt like you were Joanna Dark.
Hi, what can I do for you? Hello. Practice makes perfect, huh?
What's this lady's problem? Does she have to go to the bathroom or something?
Perfect Dark is a story set in the year 2023.
You know, I feel cheated, world. Hey, Elon Musk, where's my flying cars? Where's my laptop gun? Where's my... Hold on, wait. Can we go back a bit? Was that Ecto Cooler she was drinking?
Two alien races, the Mayans and the Skedar, are at war with one another. The Mayans are a peaceful group of stereotypical gray alien life forms, and the Skedar are the antagonists that kinda look like a mishmash of dinosaurs and the Brood from the X-Men comics. However, the latter can change their appearance to look human, so there's some Invasion of the Body Snatcher and Thing movie vibes here too. Anyways, the Mayans are secretly working with a group called the Carrington Institute, which in and of itself is a research facility and spy headquarters. The Skedar are in league with a corporation called Datadyne, who specialize in military defense. The Skedar work out a deal to supply alien weapons and technology to Datadyne if given access to a spacecraft at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. The head of the Carrington Institute, Daniel Carrington, enlists the help of one of his best agents, Joanna Dark, to stop Datadyne and the Skedar. Along the way, she encounters characters like Dr. Carroll, an AI in a briefcase that she has to rescue, along with Elvis, a Mayan in need of saving after his ship crash lands near Area 51. He later joins you in missions throughout the game. The plot isn't too heavy, but is told through a variety of cutscenes with fully voiced characters, an impressive feat for the Nintendo 64. As we mentioned the references for Perfect Dark earlier, the lead heroine is no different. Take Dana Scully's intelligence and wit and combine it with Motoko Kusanagi's combat and weapons experience, and you've got one deadly, beautiful secret agent in the form of Miss Joanna Dark. The developers never actually stated they took Kusanagi as a reference, but personally, I can see it. They've stated, though, that there were several other female protagonists that were referenced outside of just Scully. The name itself comes from historical figure Joan of Arc's French pronunciation, which is Jeanne d'Arc, though there's been some debate amongst the developers as to whether which came first, either the name Joanna Dark and then they fit it retroactively to Jeanne d'Arc, or vice versa. Rare seemingly crafted a sci-fi Lara Croft in an age where female heroes were just beginning to come into their own lead roles in video games. Sure, there were definitely female protagonists in games during the 8 and 16-bit generations, but it was during the 32 and 64-bit eras that female roles began expanding and growing beyond just eye candy or damsels in distress. Women were becoming a force of reckoning in video games, and the team at Rare saw to it to build a presence that the player could really identify with. Much like Croft, Joanna was given different outfits to fit the appropriate narrative of what she was doing in a mission. Even though Joanna Dark's role was mostly in first person, you really felt a connection while playing as her thanks to some of her side chatter throughout the game. Plus, having Daniel Carrington directing and sometimes even scolding Dark always gave me the feeling that there was more to this role than meets the eye. The immersion is unbelievable in Perfect Dark.
Just who is this help you keep referring to?
Not now, Joanna. Time for radio silence. Good luck.
Thanks a lot.
I remember the ad campaign on this game featuring a real model which portrayed her in both commercials and displays in stores.
I'll never forget the first time I saw this standee hanging out at EB Games. I mean, look at this. This is like the epitome of badassery, right? Is that a word? Not important. I asked them if I could take it home, and they said yeah. So it remained in my collection for a number of years, but unfortunately I had to get rid of it when I moved. And it was something that I really regretted. One of my biggest regrets in terms of game collecting and just game memorabilia collecting. So I continued my search every single month, trying to find out if I could find it, and I finally found it a couple years ago, unfortunately missing the easel back so that it's not able to stand upright, but I just am happy to have it back in my collection in any capacity.
There was clearly a push for merchandising here, but sadly it didn't exactly get off the ground as Joanna wasn't nearly as popular as Lara Croft was. But for those of us who enjoyed the game, we hunted down as much as we could. Over the years, I've tried to collect as much Perfect Dark merchandise as I can, and it always impressed me how many different poses the developers had for her. I got curious, so I reached out to Kevin Bayliss, one of Rare's most important artists. He was responsible for designing both Killer Instinct and Battletoads, amongst other art design roles and projects within the company. But oddly enough, his name was absent from Perfect Dark aside from an obscure, non-art based credit, but the answer he gave was kind of shocking to me. I asked Kevin, do you know why the team made so many 3D renders of Joanna? There are so many different poses that I've seen on different posters and online, and I've never really seen a game outside of maybe Tomb Raider to have so many rendered poses of the lead character back then. Any thoughts? I was responsible for all of the promo renders and building the Jo Dark character for those. There was only a low poly model that existed when the game was nearing end of development, so they asked me to build up a quick box art model to replace the version they had paired together with the low poly models. I built a head and eyes, literally just a face section, in a few hours, and rendered that up, which was then used as the box art. However, then they needed promotional material, and so a proper model was required, and also to be used as a guide for the doll that was created. So I took the original idea and created a NURBS model, which is the one you see on all those renders and is the likeness of the doll. There's a total of 9 missions, which equals 21 levels, 3 in each, and every level had 3 different difficulty options: Agent, Special Agent, and Perfect Agent. There are also 4 bonus missions that can be unlocked depending on how much you complete within the game's story mode, as well as some of the gun trainings. Each one adds additional things to do aside from just getting from beginning to end. Some are escort missions, some require you to trigger or activate different switches, buttons, or inanimate objects such as hacking robots or sabotaging taxis to create distractions. The scope of the levels are massive. Some may seem claustrophobic, like the first stage's dizzying amount of stairs, and others are huge, open canvases of snow and ice, like the stage after Air Force One goes down. All locales are different and special in their own way, from the inner city stylings of Chicago to the alien Skedar Hive and the Pelagic 2's in-depth base. While I feel like the game's earlier stages are its strongest, the entire campaign is impressive, merely from a scale perspective alone. The thing is, Perfect Dark was absolutely loaded with content that was extremely innovative for its time, to the point that literally every first-person shooter after it took inspiration. And, in some certain cases, Perfect Dark is still a trailblazer today, with some unique features that were never before seen, that haven't really been seen since its release. Where do I start? How about, oh my goodness, the guns. The guns in Perfect Dark. They might be part of my favorite first-person shooter arsenal of all time.
I typically used any gun, dual wieldy style. Wait, am I the only one that calls it that?
Alright, let me explain. Dual wieldies means dual wielding guns, something that Perfect Dark had in abundance. And every single weapon had a secondary mode triggered by holding the B button on the controller. So pistols became pistol whips, maulers would charge and store shots for more powerful bursts, laptop guns turned into sentry turrets, and some of the cooler ones like the K7 Avenger sensing explosives, the Reaper turning into a grinder gun, the Devastator changing from a grenade launcher to a sticky bomb wall hugger, and the Farsight XR20 seeing through walls?
This blew my mind back in the day, but then again, it is a little cheap because all you have to do is just press the secondary fire button, and while pressing R, you can just search to find somebody and then shoot them. But I will say it does leave you open to attacks.
And of course, who could forget weapons like the Callisto NTG and dual Phoenix pistols? These were also based on alien tech. The Callisto NTG allowed you to shoot either super fast clips worth of ammo or high impact slower shots. Or you could use the Phoenix, which had a secondary shot that blasted little explosion bullets.
I nicknamed them the vagina guns for the way they reload. Here's the deal. I was a virgin until college. I was playing this when I was 17. You think I had game back then? I mean, I was naming reloads in video games after reproductive parts. I was in bad shape, people. Bad shape.
Even your default punch had a secondary attack which would disarm and turn your enemy woozy, though this was debilitating when it happened to you. My biggest complaint about this was, if you died and respawned in multiplayer, it felt like the wooziness would take forever to stop. If you die in the game, your respawn should clear you of that completely. Anyways, I could sit here and list every example of the weapons in this game, but there are just so many, and they're so fun to play with. Another cool feature is that you can use the N64 transfer pack. Hooking up the Game Boy Color prequel of the same name unlocked 4 different cheats that can be used: Hurricane Fist, R-Tracker, all weapons in solo mode, and weapon cache locations. This is sadly missing from the Japanese version of the game, but not to fret, as apparently all of this can be eventually unlocked within the game without the use of the transfer pack. It just makes it a lot easier. By the way, worst part about that Game Boy Color prequel, barely any of the amazing music from the N64 game made it in. Speaking of music, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, despite it being absolutely fantastic, because, well, here's some shameless self-promotion. My podcast, XVGM Radio, interviewed lead composer Grant Kirkhope a few years ago. We did an entire 2+ hours with him on just Perfect Dark, and even he admitted publicly that it was the longest he'd ever talked about Perfect Dark, which I think is a compliment? Maybe? Either way, Kirkhope also co-composed the GoldenEye soundtrack, but this time around, he took over for the original Perfect Dark soundtrack lead, Graham Norgate, who was one of the developers who left to start Free Radical. Norgate, Kirkhope, and the later Perfect Dark Zero composer, David Klinick, created some incredibly memorable music in Perfect Dark that is an absolute joy to listen to in and out of the game. Going for a more electronic meets cinematic vibe, these composers brought some high-octane energy to fuel each level and everything in between. I personally loved tailoring the soundtrack in the multiplayer modes to just feature the faster-paced portions of each track. Because, yeah, you could do that, and it was awesome. Here's some brief examples. If you want to know more about Kirkhope's compositions, you should definitely check out the interview my co-host Justin and I conducted with him. Link down below. Multiplayer is nestled within a section of the game called the Combat Simulator, which features an insane amount of content. There are 30 challenges against AI that can be near impossible in the higher stages. The game's single player also features co-op mode, where either a second or computer player can play as Joanna's sister Velvet Dark along with you, as well as counter-op mode, where you're trying to defeat Joanna Dark while playing as one of the guards. In Combat Simulator, you can add up to 8 different simulant AI players on top of up to 3 of your friends and yourself in some of the most chaotic multiplayer in any first-person shooter. Each one can be tailored to multiple different costumes, and you can even give them weird, goofy heads.
Like the crackhead alien! Oh, come on. Don't look at me like that, alright? I know I'm not the only one that put that guy's head on this guy's alien body. He looks tweaked out! Stay away from me, you weirdo!
There's different styles of AI that can be added, and they're all named differently based on their appropriate attributes. Some are faster than others, some will exclusively go after you, some will hide in fear, others will only use certain types of weapons, and even a single player match with 8 bots is complete insanity in the most fun of ways. There's also different modes of gameplay like Capture the Bag, King of the Hill, Deathmatch, and so much more. The game is completely jam-packed with fun in every corner. Even walking around the Carrington Institute is a minigame in and of itself. You can go into weapons training mode and try to get all the stars for each weapon. There are some that, even after all these years, I still can't beat. Perfect Dark's visuals are some of the most impressive on the Nintendo 64. The game was so advanced that it required the expansion pack just to play the entire game. However, the high resolution mode in the game really brings down the frame rate, so I just leave it off. I'm capturing footage here with a native N64 and S-Video, and it still looks pretty impressive overall. I think the thing that really still stands out to me is the lighting. The lights were so bright and really gave off a realistic hue to them. Plus, you could shoot them out to make rooms go dark for an added offensive bonus. With additional features like the Cam Spy to shoot spy photographs that look like they were filmed for a Beastie Boys video, as well as different modes like night vision, the developers really tried to think of new and exciting ways to make Joanna's adventure seem all the more real. In 2010, long after Nintendo did the unforgivable and sold their shares of Rare to Microsoft, Perfect Dark was reskinned and updated for a more modern digital re-release, with improvements to frame rate, art style, and more. The game runs great here, but honestly, I just don't play this version as much as I played the original N64 version. Maybe it's the nostalgia?
It's probably the nostalgia.
Unfortunately, Perfect Dark sold less than its predecessor GoldenEye, and there's a number of factors as to why that happened. Releasing late in the N64's life cycle, the game probably looked a bit dated stacked up against the cleaner textures and smoother frame rates of games on Sega's Dreamcast. And with just a few months left until the PlayStation 2 would launch in North America, a game like Perfect Dark may have been seen by many as the swan song of the Nintendo 64. Requiring the N64 expansion pack to access the entire experience, as well as complaints of lower frame rates when the high resolution mode was enabled, Perfect Dark could be seen by some as an inferior product to GoldenEye in that sense. However, in my opinion, Perfect Dark blew GoldenEye out of the skies thanks to its advancements in nearly every category otherwise when compared. Perfect Dark has struggled to remain within the gaming zeitgeist. Aside from the portable prequel game on the Game Boy Color to the troubled delay and release of an even deeper prequel, Perfect Dark Zero, the series was planned to be continued with 3 different sequels to the original, which all got cancelled by Microsoft, leading Joanna to fade to black. It seems that troublesome development is a consistent trait of the franchise, as a rebooted game was announced by Microsoft back in 2020, with very little news since the teaser. Personally, watching this left a bad taste in my mouth. Gone was the exciting science fiction world of the original, and in place of it, a more present take on what the future could hold. Looking at this future in 2023, it doesn't seem to feature the more lofty aspirations of the original, instead just looking kind of generic with a lackluster soundtrack that just echoes modern movies. I know the game's not out yet, but Perfect Dark's reboot seems to be poised to just be that in name and nothing else. Thankfully, we'll always have the original experience to fall back on, no matter what happens in the future with the franchise. I guess what I'm trying to say is Perfect Dark, in my eyes, is a masterpiece. A perfect game. As close as you could get in the year 2000. A game that was so chock full of innovation, some of which never saw the light of day, like the Transfer Pack Game Boy Color camera feature that could put you into the game as a character. The developers tried anything and everything they could to make this game into something truly special, which in and of itself made the experience like lightning in a bottle. Flipping through Nintendo Power back then, I knew this was a game I had to have day one. That day was today, 23 years ago. It's kind of wild to reflect on the experience of such a game-changing first-person shooter all these years later and still be blown away at how much more fun I had with this one as compared to other, more modern first-person shooters.
From the amazing soundtrack, to the incredible story and exciting cast of characters, to the unbelievable assortment of weapons that you could choose in this game, and the tight gameplay, somewhat dipping frame rate, but honestly, can you blame it? This game really pushed the boundaries of the Nintendo 64, and to me, it's more important of a release than GoldenEye. While GoldenEye was the blueprints, Perfect Dark was the essence of what a first-person shooter could be at that time on a console. So, when it comes down to 2023, the anniversary of not only the game taking place, but also the release date that we are currently in, I sit here and wonder to myself, what game am I going to be playing in 2046, 23 years from now? Well, I can assure you, Perfect Dark will definitely be it. Thanks for watching, and to anyone who helped make this game over at Rare, thank you.
Thanks to all Patreon supporters, but especially the Morningstar Whip tier and up. They are Sam Schaefer, Scott McElhone, Venthros, Great White North Presents, Nintenjo, Bryce, Derek Demitter, and Trevin Adams. Your continued support helps fund reviews like this one, which would simply not be possible without the donations from Patreon members. I appreciate each and every one of you for continuing to help me make the content that you want to see. Classic, goofy YouTube video game reviews. If anyone is interested, just $1 down gets you access to exclusive streams on Discord, Director's Cut commentary for past episodes, a free sticker, regular updates on upcoming reviews, and more. Check it out at patreon.com/dongled. I hate to sound like a typical YouTuber, but if Patreon is not your thing, and you still want to help get the word out, share this video on social media. Exposure really helps, so if you like these videos and think your friends will too, sharing it with them means a lot. Want more Dude You Haven't Played This Game? Check out the videos enclosed below. You can click on the left hand side or the right hand side for a totally different but totally awesome review. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Dude You Haven't Played This Game.